everyone, welcome back to WiDS Maastricht Conference video series. We hope you enjoyed the previous video. So in this video, you will hear a very fruitful panel discussion.
Thank you everyone for joining. Hello from us. We are Rianne and Constance from FEM, that's Female Empowerment Maastricht University. And Rianne, do you quickly want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm a senior scientist in the clinical data science group, and we are based out of Maastricht Clinic, which is part of, sort of affiliated with FHML. And I've been with FEM, I don't actually know, like a year and a half maybe, so quite a while, yeah.
And I'm Constance, I'm the diversity officer of Maastricht University, and I have a PhD in history of science. So I don't really belong to your crowd, but I always like to listen in when I can. We wanted to participate in this conference as well. We already did last year, and this is a really important event. So we thought, okay, what could we do from FEM that is maybe interesting for this conference? And so we thought that we do know from past events and from other events that people actually really like to also hear not only your interesting talks, but to also hear a bit about the path, what brought you to become the researcher that you are today. So we do know that there's lots of interest from the community in understanding what were the big moments in your career, what kind of choices did you make, what actually made you come to the point where you're at. So I would like to thank Rachel and Anda for being here today. And Rachel, do you want to start?
So I started with a master's in maths and computer science, and then I kind of went a little bit more computer sciencey, but also a tiny bit of biology, because I was doing a PhD that was bio-inspired. So basically they said that I was really lucky. They started the PhD and it wasn't fixed to any particular project, and they just said, do something bio-inspired. So I had to read some biology to get inspired. And by reading biology, I found that biologists were generating all this data and they had all these interesting problems and interesting questions. So I decided to change fields. And as my postdoc, I started collaborating with biologists. I continued that, moving from a computer science department and collaborating with biologists to being a computer scientist within a biology department, embedded in, first in biomolecular medicine at Imperial College London, and then in Maastricht in toxicogenomics. But then when you get to assistant professor level, you kind of want to teach what you know. I'm not very good at teaching biology. I wasn't taught it at school. I wasn't taught it at university. So I moved back to maths and computer science in the Department of Data Science and Knowledge Engineering, where I now teach a mixture of maths courses and artificial intelligence, machine learning to systems biology students, as well as doing my own research into methods and applying it to biological data sets still. That's me.
Thanks, Rachel. And always nice to see the interdisciplinary identity crisis that seems to pop up at one moment when we do interdisciplinary research. Anda, would you also like to give a short background like this? What does Rachel give?
My path is much interesting because I started computer science and then I did computer science and then I did computer science and so on. So, however, I was interested in, if I look back at how the research basically pushed me into what I'm doing now, which is more related to sociology and social networks and such. And now I'm going too much into journalism, maybe, is simply from looking at initially distributed systems and then looking at how the users of those systems, many computers connected by internet in a big network, and trying to understand how the users of those systems interact with each other, or what do they want from the big distributed system. And then I stayed looking at the users and trying to connect them based on their interests, maybe in the same files or the same type of computation, if it was a computational problem, and then moved towards seeing how they interact in social media, which became now a big distributed system of its sort. So this is sort of the path that took me basically from research question to research question, and allowing to learn new things and get into new problems.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Anna. So now we have a bit of an idea of your background in terms of disciplinary backgrounds. And for today, we are with FEM, we thought about what could be the guiding topics for such a session. And we came up with crossroads. So what kind of choices did you have to make? What kind of people were involved in your professional and maybe also private life to get to where you are today? What technical competencies have you found to be crucial for a career in data science? And how do you deal with work-life balance? So you both prepared some slides, and we will go point by point. It would be nice if you tell a bit about it. Rachel, on crossroads. So what were choices, important moments?
Yeah, so for the crossroads, I immediately started thinking about the first position after my PhD. I mean, that's a crucial position. It kind of defines the direction that I've gone in. I was applying for loads and loads of positions, and at first I wasn't getting anywhere with anyone. I realized after a little while it was because I was writing these. I thought a covering letter was just like a note saying, here is my application, here is my CV, full stop, please consider me. And I didn't work out for a long time that a covering letter should be a longer document explaining how you meet the criteria, how advertising yourself essentially. So at some point that clicked, and suddenly I started getting responses to all these applications I was sending out. And so there was this 1 week when I ended up with 3 job interviews in the UK. The first one on Monday was in Aberdeen, which is northern Scotland. On Tuesday, I was in London. And on Wednesday, I was in Manchester. So Manchester's in the middle. And I was living in York, which is about just a little bit north of Manchester, but on the other side of the country. So I did Sunday night in Aberdeen, travelled down to York after the interview on Monday. Then Tuesday morning, travelled down to London in time for the interview in London. Did an interview in London and then went back to York and travelled across. And even things like I was writing presentations in the evenings in York, having done all this massive amount of travelling. And these 3 jobs were in completely different fields. The one in Aberdeen, well, not completely. The one in Aberdeen was in a computer science department, collaborating with biologists. The one in London was all about trying to understand how chess players, master level chess players, see the board and play the game. And the one in Manchester was about trying to detect chemical attacks in underground or in enclosed spaces through sensors and technologies there, and doing the data science for that. And so they were all completely and utterly different. And I didn't really I had this idea I wanted to move into the bio area, into biology, but I didn't have a clear idea. And I know now that I didn't discuss this with my PhD supervisors. I didn't really discuss it with anyone. I just went to these 3 interviews, and I actually ended up with 3 job offers. The Aberdeen job offered me the job that I'd applied for. London offered me the job that I'd applied for. Manchester didn't offer me the job that I'd applied for, but did say they wanted to continue talking to me because they thought there was another position that I could be interested in there. I now realise I had this really cryptic conversation with my PhD supervisor where he did something really unusual. He came into my office, which he never normally did. The big professor, head of department, comes into your office, and he starts giving me these cryptic comments about, not going for certain jobs but not really spelling anything out. And it's only with hindsight that I realised that he was basically saying, my friends in Manchester really want you, but they haven't offered you the job you applied for. Why don't you go for that one? And I was the risk-averse, naive PhD student who said, well, I've definitely got a job in Aberdeen, and this job in Manchester is a bit of a maybe still as far as I can see. So I took the job in Aberdeen. And so this is why I say I think it's really good to cultivate those open conversations with people as openly as possible, because when you've got these cryptic conversations, especially when you're young and you're still unsure about these things, it doesn't necessarily help you. You can take away the wrong message very, very easily. Yeah.
Thanks. I think that's probably something that many people can recognize, the risk aversion, rather going for the sure thing than actually having a conversation about it. Adriana, I don't know whether there are any comments from the audience or questions or something.
There's one question for Adriana, but it has nothing to do with the crossroads thing, I think. But Kedma asks, which elements make a topic contagious in social media? What are general patterns? Does it vary per channel? Do you maybe have anything to add to that?
Well, if this was known, then all the marketing people will be out of jobs. So it's not known. But what we know is that, for example, Facebook has algorithms that is enraging. So basically, if you're angry, you're more likely to stuck with the platform, and this is how they make their money by. So that's one way. Apparently, cats, nice pictures of cats and dogs do only that much. But then if you're angry with something, injustice, or, that's what catches people. If I am to talk about crossroads, maybe I have a different, I second Rachel's point. It's you're let loose in a big world right after the PhD, and you feel like you have to jump into I don't know, the first job that offers, or maybe the path that you've seen before. In my case, I had an option for at IBM research versus a postdoc in academia. I was very set that I don't want to go into industry. Why? What was that based on? I don't know. Sometimes you just have gut instinct or the wrong instinct, who knows? But basically, I turned down a postdoc offer for much, much, much more money that would have been IBM research. In my mind from that time was that IBM research had already became this product focused place where you had to, you didn't have freedom of choosing research topics. You had to align them with the objectives of the company. And I thought that that would put me on a path that would not allow me to go back to academia. I don't know if this is true. I don't know if life would have been more interesting otherwise. We never know. We take some paths, right, at some point, and you don't have the data points to compare. There was also, it's a point of mentors. One was in college back in Bucharest, who was the first time in my years of college when somebody was telling me, somebody with power, right, a professor, was telling me that if you don't understand, it's because somebody didn't place the message right. It's not you. It's not, you're not, dumb or not talented for this, or God knows what other explanations you come up with. But basically, mushy minds send mushy messages and they don't reach the audience. And that, I think, gave me a boost later on in teaching, when I realized that I am going into the mushy minds place because teaching takes too much time. And when I realized that I was going there and I put the effort into clearing the message, I finally started enjoying teaching much, much more than before. And there is another message that came from a professor that's not in my field, but who was chair of civil engineering, I think, back at Duke. And this was a piece of advice that he gave to all his assistant professors. And I was a postdoc at Duke at the time, and he basically told me that, do what you're in academia not to make a lot of money. Academia compared to industry, it's not, you don't get rich. So at least do something you have fun doing. Find what you like in research. Find your path. Of course, you have to pay attention to what matters in terms of funding and what are the real problems that the world is paying attention to. But in that space, find something that really passions you, because if you are passionate about something, then you do good work. And if you don't get tenure, because this was a discussion of how do you handle tenure versus do what you like. If you don't have tenure, at least you had fun. If you don't get tenure, at least you have fun. But if you put yourself in a place where you hate your life with the objective of escaping suddenly after tenure, then it's one thing that doesn't necessarily pay in the long run. So I thought that was a good advice, and I realized that I paid attention to it years after I heard it. And then the other mentors are sometimes your colleagues, and sometimes it's your PhD students who might have, or postdocs who might have maybe an because you see their fears and you realize that you shouldn't mirror them maybe, and you should have not, or sometimes because you see their courage of taking on something new or exploring something new, that also is inspiring.
Yeah, so like mentors can be in all kinds of different places, sometimes unexpected. Thank you. Were there any questions about the crossroads?
Adriana, I would like to ask you a question. You also wrote down low teaching load and travel budget. What do you mean with that? That you enjoy low teaching loads, which most people probably do, or what did you have in mind when you wrote that?
I think it was a question somewhere that I don't know where it's coming from. Maybe it was, what are
Yes.
the facilities, I think. Okay. If you you need some support from the infrastructure, right? From and just to allow you enough time to focus and to make your mind to understand who you are and to make progress in research, and especially at the beginning of a career, a low teaching load. Teaching takes much more time than you expect, or this was my experience, right? And that time comes from somewhere. It comes most likely from the research time. So allowing that research time, which is a message that basically we need to take for the administration, for the higher up very often, especially in computer science or engineering fields where we have a relatively small teaching load, but also the expectations for research grants and research productivity is huge. So balancing this is important, especially for people who set the limits. And travel budget is one very basic, let's say, enabler that allow especially young people to build a career. And to at least it's a way of getting courage, because you go present a paper, you see that you are as good as other people. And or you get ideas or you get feedback, and it's very important. Or you build a network that is just supportive over the years. So all these are very good resources, support the structures. How should someone find a mentor? I'm still looking for that answer. I don't think you find it. I think it finds you somehow. I was assigned a mentor, let's say at some point, I think, early on in my career. And if you don't click, you just don't click. So it's a forced relationship that doesn't, you just tick another, requirements, and it just doesn't, I don't think it brings you a lot much. I don't know if the mind is open if you are in a relationship that doesn't necessarily work, even if the person is giving the right advice in the right form. So I don't know. I think the people I mentioned as mentors, I don't know. First, I don't know if they know they were. In fact, after this talk, I will have to write to the chair of civil engineering, who now is dean at the university in Florida. I noticed, acknowledging the advice after, I don't know, 15 years or so. So yeah.
So you can
add to this, maybe, Rachel, from your experience, for example, about how finding a mentor, or about teaching load.
Teaching load has a big impact on, yeah, as you said, the other things that you can do, the pressure to publish, but it's also about finding a position that has the right balance for you. I love teaching, and I love the fact that the time that I invest in teaching, even though I have a very high teaching load, is appreciated by my department and that's valued in my evaluation. So it's not that I have a high teaching load and then I'm evaluated on the fact that my research isn't the same output as someone at a different university who had a much lower teaching load. At least that's taken into account, I feel, when I'm being evaluated. And so you need to make sure that the teaching load matches with the expectations that people have of what you're going to achieve.
Good point. Yeah. If
I also
the expectations, then I guess, you know, if you're happy with it, you're good. Yeah. There's one other person that asks, how Chang says this, how about having a finding your mentor session with a speed dating format next year? That might be a good idea. I do think finding mentors is really crucial within your department, but also outside your department. I think you know, independent view of your career, I guess. Yeah.
And I also think what Anda already said, the mentor-mentee relationship doesn't always have to be like this huge thing where you have regular meetings. You know, sometimes it can also just be a one sentence that someone says to you that can stick with you. And sometimes it can be ad hoc mentoring on questions. Like, for example, the next question we have that is, so which technical competencies are the most important? But sometimes you can now be a mentor for a couple of minutes, because that was a question that actually came from the IDS group saying we're so interdisciplinary and there's so many technical competencies that we can or should have. So which ones have you considered the most important in your career path and what you see in the field? Rachel, do you want to start?
So programming I find to be a really key skill because without that skill, you're reliant on the tools that other people produce, and you're reliant on the assumptions that those people make within those tools. Even if I choose to use a tool, I can at least it's a choice that I could go a different way and write my own code to do it. And I don't, if I decide that the assumptions someone else is making don't fit my data, I can change them. And so it gives you that independence to be able to work with data in a different way. And it also means that you gain a better understanding of the methods and the data because you're writing things for yourself. The other really key one, which I really try to encourage with my students, is this critical thinking. So why do my results look like this? Not just here, I've put my data set through this tool and this is my results. Aren't I good? Yeah, here we are. Or I've put them through this algorithm. Here's what the output is. But what's really going on here? And the reason that's really important is that you find mistakes. Sometimes I even plant mistakes in my assignments and see how many of my students spot them. Not many often. But also understanding methods better. I've learned so much by using the same method with the data normalized in different ways or the data scaled in different ways and seeing the impact that it has. And that experience teaches me actually theoretical things about the method, because I then try and relate it back to, well, why does the method work like that? Why does this happen? Why does that happen? And so the more you can practice those two skills, the more you'll be able to do and the more understanding you'll have of everything in data science, in my opinion.
Anda, I think when I see your slide, you think all of it is important.
No, I agree with Rachel's point. Plus, yes, of course, everything is important, but that was my plus was to Rachel's points on the previous slide rather than to all the petals of the flower. Basically, knowing the tools and thinking about what the tools produce is an absolute need. And the idea of putting mistakes in assignments is brilliant. I think I am talented. I do this intuitively anyway, but play some purpose from now on. But yes, and then what I found useful is, especially after you work for a while on the same problem, when it's losing its either you're losing interest in the problem, or you solved enough of the problem that it's time to move on to something else. Having an eye open to applications is very useful, and that can come. For example, I've worked with a sociologist for the last 12 years now, and I learned a lot from that interaction, because we in computer science are 0 and 1s. We see something that goes above the average and we make big claims, while the sociologists are much more refrained in doing this, and they are trying to understand, is it something really you pay attention to? Is it something indeed, is it a different phenomena that explains what you're seeing than what you're jumping at now? So I think that thinking is part of the critical thinking, but part of not our training as just numerical quantitative people who would see numbers and we decide one way or another. So being open to applications and to areas outside, I think, in my opinion, or in my experience, proved to be very interesting, because it keeps me interested in research and in problems and finding new problems to work on.
Are there any questions from the audience?
Not so far. No. So let's keep going. We only have a couple minutes left.
Yes, we only have 3 minutes left. So maybe we go to the last subject, which is work-life balance. So a bit, how do you negotiate the mobility and flexibility of academic work? How does your work week look like a general work week? And how does that maybe impact family and other life choices? Rachel, do you want to start?
Yeah, I enjoy the mobility of academic life. I'm not at the stage, or I'm not the kind of person who would want to be traveling every week around the world, but you know, a few times a year, just some nice travel is something I enjoy, those regular opportunities to travel. And of course, at the moment, I am living abroad. I'm living in Maastricht, and I grew up in the UK. So I've been here for 10 years now, more than 10 years, and it's been an amazing experience. I love it. And I'm really glad that working in academia has given me those opportunities. In terms of a working week, I try to keep work to working hours, but you really, really need to be efficient when you're doing that. When you're working, you need to work. You can't slack off, and it's not always going to work. Okay, even then, there are crunch times, a grant deadline, a paper deadline, teaching next week, you're teaching two, 3 courses at once. It's not going to work. And you have to accept that even when you work really hard, really efficiently, and I know I'm really lucky. I'm single, I've got no kids around. I don't have a lot of the issues that I see, especially in lockdown, some of my colleagues really struggling with. So, yeah. So I guess my work-life balance is quite nice compared to a lot of people, but yeah, I recognize the issues that others have too.
If you still have tips on how to efficiently work, how to really, to use those hours that efficiently, do you still have any tips?
I'm finding my to-do list is really useful, because I write down everything on my to-do list and I have it next to me. I've got it here, at all times, and it's an enormous to-do list. Even little small tasks are all on it. But that means whenever I've got that, oh, I've just finished a task, it's not, oh, what am I going to do next? I can look and I can find a task that fits the amount of time I've got. I mean, that's one of the things with academia I find, is that I'm often ending up with small blocks of time in between meetings, and trying to use those bits of time efficiently is really tough. And without a to-do list, I think I'd flounder there, that I wouldn't be able to work out what little task can I do for the next 10 minutes that I can actually tick something off and get it done. And you need to make those decisions quick. And also having a bit of a plan for the day, that, okay, today I'm going to try and finish this bigger thing.
Thanks, I think it makes perfect sense. Anna, work-life balance, any thoughts?
it needs to be a balance because it's not, I don't think it's sustainable, and there is a creativity need in our profession that goes to hell if you are trying to put, I don't know, 80 hours a day for months and months at a time. That being, a day you can't, but a week. That being said, I gave up, I think, even before the pandemic, of even regular work hours, because you have deadlines, and when the deadlines happen and they are on Saturday morning at 6 a.m. These are the newest deadlines in the time zone where I am, which is anywhere on Earth. Deadlines. I want to be the person who finishes at 5 p.m. on Friday and the paper is ready to submit, or the grant is ready to submit, but I am not, and I think I gave up trying. Yes, I happen to work at night on Fridays until 1 a.m. or whenever I can't take it anymore and the students are finishing submitting. I have, and before the pandemic, they would have the, time and time again, a flu, a cold, or something, and that's when you plan your day, you make your to-do list, and then you forget about it. But then, so then you have to be adaptive, and I'm very lucky to have an extremely supportive partner who's also academic, therefore he knows the game. And now, for example, he's feeding the kids for the morning, before the e-learning. Since the pandemic, the kids have been home in e-learning. So it's total chaos. Basically, it's whoever has a deadline gets to work. And the other ones are trying to fold as we go and keep going this way. So I guess flexibility is what's needed when you can, but also pay attention to the fact that life is not only work.
I think that's probably an important conclusion. Thank you so much for all your insights. Yeah, thank you very much for having us. Thank you for sharing. I hope it was informative.
If you like this video, please subscribe our channel. We will deliver more interesting video for you.